Well, thank you so much for getting us started. And we're glad to have everyone here on this Friday afternoon. And you are literally with an all-star cast today. So we got Kristine behind the scenes, and then our other STAR trainers. If you're not familiar with STAR, it's Student Achievement in Reading, and from which much of the EBRI work has come and has been enhanced by. So much of our literacy professional development is done by people on this webinar. So we're really glad to have these folks behind you. So you've got Kristine, of course, running tech. I'm Patsy, I direct Atlas, and I'm just wanted to be here at your final webinar series to welcome you and to thank Marn and Kristine and Penny for their hard work, not just today, but over the years. I've been with Atlas about 10 years, and they have been involved the whole time and predate me. So you are in very, very good hands today. So thank you so much for being here to talk about comprehension. I'll give it to Marn.
Welcome, everyone. As Kristine mentioned, to our final webinar of this series. I appreciate that you're here. If we haven't met over the 6 webinars, of course, I'm Marn, and I used to work for Atlas. I retired almost 2 years ago, but during those 2 years, I've been doing some private tutoring. And it's been such a pleasure to see the EBRI practices that we've been sharing with you over the months really, really work for both adult and children. Penny, do you want to introduce yourself?
I'm Penny Brown. I teach adult education at the Dean Lakes Education Center in Shakopee, and I teach intermediate reading and advanced reading.
So Penny has a very strong practitioner voice. She's an excellent teacher. We worked as STAR trainers, including Kristine. So I'm delighted to have Penny with me today. Kristine, anything more you wanted to add?
Nope, not at this time.
So we're going to do an emoji check-in. We haven't done this for months. In fact, I think the last one we did was after a major snowstorm. So Kristine will explain how to do the emoji check-in.
Yes, so you can do this 2 different ways. You can either go to chat on your Zoom toolbar. You may have to go to the 3 dots that you see with more. And you can click on the face, and that's one way you can choose an emoji. You can also go to the reactions on your toolbar where you would go to raise your hand. And again, you can choose something that's there, or you can go to those 3 dots and you've got a lot more choices. And see, look at this. We're all getting so good at this tech stuff.
All smiles so far. Not sure if Kelly, oh, she is outside or she wants to be outside. Got it, too hot to be outside.
Yes, I do notice we're getting a little bot action here. I just privately messaged Patsy about it. Some of you are getting a weird message from a Don Schaefer asking about taking notes with AI or something. Ignore that for now. That is not anything that's coming from anyone here.
Well, that's strange. I'll see if I can take care of it. Thanks for letting us know, everybody.
And go ahead, Marn.
Move ahead.
Penny.
Okay. All right. Thank you for sharing your emoji feelings. During this webinar or meeting, We're going to go through 4 things that are similar to the previous webinars. Of course, first of all, we'll talk about the research evidence. There's a lot more research on comprehension, but when I was thinking about that, I wanted to reinforce the idea that comprehension is the end product, and the process includes alphabetics, fluency, and vocabulary. And you can't produce a product unless your other process components are solidly in place. So as we talked about at webinar 1, there are many, many interrelationships between the 4 reading components, all working towards comprehension. Then Penny will take us through an activity called Teach the Reader, Not the Reading, which might be a new concept for you, but I think very important to visit. Then we'll focus on 3 comprehension strategy routines that demonstrate how to teach the reader. There are more than 3, but we're going to focus on the top 3, mostly because we don't have a whole lot of time. The time flies during these webinars. And then, like we have in the other webinars, we'll take a look at the teacher recommended resources. I'll assure you again that you don't have to go out and look for comprehension resources. They are readily available and all tested and tried by teachers who recommend them. A reminder, if you're new or if you've been with us for more than 1 webinar, you have access to a complete participant folder. Here it is in alphabetical order. So if we look at comprehension, we see there's another challenges and solutions updated over many years of STAR. 2-sided handout on the highlights of comprehension instruction. Suggested questions, stems, and frames. And text-dependent question and stems. I also included the latest research synthesis from Project STAR. So it's a 5-page document. It's available public domain. And so what the researchers do is they look at research during the past year that's related or connected to adult literacy, and they pull out the best pieces to share. So that's a new addition to the participant folder. Of course, the first evidence that I'm sharing comes from this book, the textbook. And for comprehension, it's core findings from multiple sources. And as I have done in the past, I will read it to you so that you can absorb this information. These are core findings. Different texts and challenges to comprehension require the use of different strategies. So no one strategy will work all the time. On the other hand, having too many strategies can be challenging. Explicit strategy instruction must provide sufficient supports. And our routines will demonstrate how you move from modeling to guided practice to more independent application. Strategy instruction seems most effective when it incorporates ample opportunities for practice. And our routines will model that also. Just going through the explicit instruction steps is multiple opportunities, but within each, you might have to add more. And finally, the greatest benefits occur when students learn to flexibly use and coordinate multiple comprehension strategies. But again, not too many in their toolkit. Kristine, will you walk us through this one?
Yes, I'm happy to. So another addition, the College and Career Readiness Standards, the ELA or English Language Arts Standards that we've had now and been working with here in Minnesota, I think actively working with since 2015, even though they came out earlier. So the idea is that students need to become college and career ready. We've also said in Minnesota, instead of the 2 C's, the 3, college, career, and community ready. Students need to really grapple with texts that are worth reading and texts that are, we talk a lot about nonfiction, but not only nonfiction, we're talking nonfiction, fiction, lots of authentic texts, because authentic texts are very different at times from what we get in the textbooks or the core texts we use that are written to be very clear for students. A lot of the real life materials that adults engage with are not well written and they're not easy to read. So the idea is that we want students to be engaging with increasingly complex readings and working on, in this case, comprehension, so that they can really gain the tools, the transferable tools to attack real life complex texts. And the standards are really focused also on the idea of argument and being able to be a real critical reader. So that's also some evidence for why evidence-based reading instruction is so important. Penny?
Thanks. This piece of evidence is from 2021, and the author is Daphne Greenberg. And I included this because it gave me an important reminder about the value of activating prior knowledge. In fact, she calls that the neglected component. Her words, instructionally, activities that probe learners' prior knowledge of a reading topic may help to activate or build up some knowledge prior to reading. So it could be as simple as reading headlines, headers, titles, boldface or italics, and asking and discussing, what are they telling us before we read? And it can also be asking the question, what do you already know? And the reason I appreciated this reminder so much is that I've been skipping over this in my tutoring because I only have an hour. But I realized from reading this that it's too important to skip. I really need to bring it back into my routine. Okay, I'm going to hand it over to Penny.
Okay. On the screen, we see an example of a piece of nonfiction text that might appear in a social studies curriculum or a reading curriculum. I'm going to give everyone a couple minutes. I'd like you to read the paragraph to yourself and then read the 4 questions. And in 2 minutes, I am going to have a question for you that I'm going to ask you to answer in chat. Okay, so I'll give everybody a couple minutes to read that. Now I have a question for you that I'd like you to respond to in chat. My question is, what would you do to teach this? If this was one of the things you needed to teach in your classroom, what would you do if you were going to teach this? Or what have you seen other teachers do when they had to teach a similar piece of text? Okay, Please type responses to that in the chat. How would you teach this? Okay, Mike is stating that he would present a model of the solar system, a picture of the solar system, so that would touch on some of that background knowledge we just talked about. Danielle indicated she would pre-teach vocabulary. Danielle, if you could type in a few of the words that you would pre-teach, that would be helpful to me. We talk about how the earth revolves around the sun. See if students have other views of that. That's what Kelly would start with a discussion. Keith would use a timeline with important dates. Okay, so he's noticing that we have quite a few dates in that text. A discussion about talking briefly about the universe scholars theory, discussion what students already know, work through that difficult vocabulary. Tamara says we need to be read more than once. I would agree. It's fairly dense as far as the amount of facts that are in that. She would add some photographs, answer questions, large questions. Okay, all right. This is very common. Okay, those are ways to teach this passage. Now here's my question. I want you to pretend tomorrow that a day after you teach this, you have another reading class. And this time your students are going to read a text on a different topic, perhaps the branches of government, the process of photosynthesis, a different topic. How many of the things that we have listed in the chat will help students understand the meaning of a different piece of text? Okay. And the answer to this is it's a bit of a gotcha question. I have a couple, nothing really. Reading more than once, yeah, would be a routine that you could transfer to another piece of text. But most of what we listed here is very specific to the content of the text, having discussions about the universe, pre-teaching words like universe scholarship theory, adding some pictures or some models of the solar system. Okay, none of these are bad things, but they're not enough. Okay, the majority of what we have listed here is focused on teaching the reading. We're focused on teaching the content of what we're reading. If you were like me and you were trained as a social studies teacher in your undergraduate work, this is what we were trained to do. Okay, we were focused on communicating content to people. But when we're working in a reading class, we need to go beyond just communicating the content, because if I focus on just teaching the content of what we read, tomorrow, my students are going to be just as dependent on me, the teacher, okay, to help them understand the meaning of what they read. Okay, in the long run, I want to get my students to a point where they can read a piece of text and they don't need me to pre-teach vocabulary. They don't need me to have those robust discussions ahead of time. They're able to unlock that meaning without me teaching the text to them directly. Okay, for me, when I initially went through STAR, this was a huge aha moment. Okay, and it kind of changed the direction of my practice. It's not that teaching content is bad, and we still want to address that, but we want to do more than just content. We want to get into teaching strategies. Marn, can we have the next screen? So this is a key concept in evidence-based reading instructions view of comprehension. And for me, it really is a little bit of a shift in philosophy, okay? When we're working on presenting and teaching formal comprehension strategies, okay, we want to focus on teaching the reader, not the reading. Teaching the reading is good in that it builds background knowledge, but the readers remain dependent on the teacher to help them unlock that meaning. Teaching the reader involves giving our students strategies that they can transfer to different pieces of text, strategies that help them understand a variety of text, a variety of genres. Teaching the reading gives students tools to ultimately become independent readers and not always needing the teacher to help them unlock meaning. Okay, next slide. In the chat box, we would like you to react to that idea of teach the reader, not the reading. This helps us kind of gauge where our audience is at. Is this a new idea to you? Is this something that you're very familiar with from your previous education and practice? What is your reaction to the idea of teach the reader, not the reading? Okay, we're getting a variety of interactions here. Aha, it's new, I'm liking it. Something that we're learning through STAR. Not sure what it looks like. Okay, it makes sense to have readers become independent. Okay, all right. So that's kind of the basis that we are going to proceed with for the rest of the session. Kristine, I see you have your hand up. You want to chime in?
Yes, because I always have to throw a wrench in things. It's really interesting because they seem like they're in conflict when we talk about the CCRS, which is really there's a lot of it that's teach the text. And then we talk about teach the reader. And I think we need to be really clear on what we mean here. Teaching the reader is really about teaching those strategies that students can use to be able to be independent. With the CCRS, when we really want to focus on the text, it isn't to teach strategies so much as to focus on the text, to look at a particular text and the craft and structure, because that leads to an impact on writing, that leads to us being able to have conversations about, word choice and some of those things. So they can coexist. Mm-hmm. We do want to teach aspects of a text that are really worth looking at in terms of the craft that writers are using. But we also want to make sure that we are teaching strategies and we're focused on the reader, because the ultimate goal of the standards and of reading instruction is for students to be able to independently read whatever they want to read.
Yep. And I think Marn kind of summarized it well. It's teach the reader, not just the reading, I think is a good way of communicating that idea. I would also agree with Kristine that this is designed STAR's kind of audience in mind was the intermediate readers, and it is by no means going to cover all of CCRS. So it is good for quite a bit of the comprehension, but it's not going to get us into the text analysis and that type of thing. Okay, so there is more.
So they really do, they're not in opposition. These things
No.
are, they
No.
can really work together depending on your purpose.
Yep. But for the focus of what we're going to do in the next hour is we're going to focus on the tools to help teach the reader. Okay. All right, Marn, next slide.
And this is my slide.
Okay.
When I was working on the slides, I had that phrase in there, teach the reader, not just the reading. I took it out, I put it back in, I took it out, I put it back in. That's how I make slides. So now I regret that I didn't put it in with the word just, because I think that one word makes it clear to understand and to not feel like you've been doing it wrong, but rather the focus might shift a bit. This is an overview of what evidence-based comprehension instruction might look like. Like in the past, it's ideal. So I'm not saying these are suggestions, but they are flexible statements that you can make work in your own classroom. Ideally, you should form groups of students at similar TABE, CASAS, or grade equivalent levels. If that's not possible, then select texts at multiple levels, same texts but different levels, or a text or texts that are slightly challenging for all. Volunteers can be used to form those individual or those small groups. Minneapolis uses a lot of volunteers when they're teaching comprehension, and they use this model of small groups of similar leveled readers. If possible, if technology and time allows, introduce text topics with videos, audios, graphics, or discussions to activate or build that important background knowledge. If you can only manage informal, remember that during fluency readings, you can stop and ask 5W plus 1H questions, or ask for the topic or main idea to be checking their comprehension as they read. More formally, over a period of time, you can model and use comprehension strategies and graphic organizers with more complex texts. You're going to build up to that by both teaching readings and teaching the reader. Okay, I think we're going to move ahead and come back to the break because we're only about halfway. So I'm going to try and move beyond this into routine 1. Routine 1 is reading closely for details. Penny, you want to take over here?
All right, so reading closely for details is, obviously one of the things that we want our readers to notice in details. The first step in this is begin with less challenging text. So if you have a group that has, multiple kind of reading levels, pick a piece of text from the kind of lowest reading level in that group. We'll introduce each and we'll provide simple meaning for keywords if needed. Then we'll read the text aloud. As you, the teacher, are reading the text, you can model how you're asking and answering questions, okay, and finding evidence from the text. Then you move into modeling and guiding students and asking questions that are not directly answered in the text. And then you gradually increase the complexity of the text, okay. So the strategy we use is the one that Marn had just talked about, is 5WH. If you want to, I think that's the next slide, Marn. And then I'll talk, okay. So 5WH is training our students to answer, first of all, answer questions that are posed to them with the who, what, why, when, where, how. and eventually can also be training them to ask those questions themselves and find the answers, okay? This is a particularly effective strategy if you have students who are accustomed to answering questions based on their personal experiences, okay? If they're not very good at looking at details in the text, but they have a tendency to answer based on their knowledge and experiences, this can help direct them back to the text, okay? Focusing on 5WH questions, you can have students take a highlighter, okay, and highlight the answers, because a lot of these can be answers that are directly stated in the text, okay? So helping them notice and look for the information that is directly stated in the text. When we're talking about teaching comprehension strategies, it's not a one-day lesson, but it is a unit that could last several weeks, okay? You might begin on day one with describing the process and modeling it for your students. The next class period, you could do multiple 3, 4, 5 class periods of simply using the strategy with the students, providing that guided practice with a variety of different types of text. So you're going to look at something from science, something from humanities, something from the newspaper, exposing them to a lot of different varieties, okay? As time goes on, you will begin to step away from your involvement and you're going to turn it over to the students, okay? And towards the end of your unit, the goal is that the students are able to find the answers to those questions or even ask the questions themselves, okay, without a lot of prompting or guidance from you. So you describe, model, provide ample guided practice, and then move into that independent practice where you're monitoring their performance. Okay. Once students can find the details that are stated explicitly in the text, you can also use the 5WH to start asking questions that would require more inferencing, okay? Where they might have to put together 2 or 3 different details from the text to come up with that answer. So there are ways that you can scaffold it from easy to more complicated questions. I think that was do we have one more slide on this one, Marn?
No,
No.
that was it.
Marn, can you go back one? And I would like to give everyone just a minute to chat questions about 5WH or other comments or reactions. It's the opportunity for me to clarify if I did not communicate that as clearly as I could. So in the chat box, please type any questions or reactions you have to this strategy. Thank you, Emma. Yep. It helps us get the students' attention back on the text. Tamara, I like that idea too. You can have students, once you've done some guided practice with them, they could create questions and then they could pass that on to their classmates, right? So you could have situations where one group creates questions, they send that piece of text on to another group, okay, who then look for answers for that questions. Marn is asking, do you find students struggle to make questions? Perhaps in the beginning on that first day of modeling or guided practice, okay? That can be a little bit challenging. If it gets a little bit overwhelming for them, I would start with just your who questions. Spend a day just focused on the who, okay, in the article. The next day you can take that same piece of text and you can focus on the what. Okay, so there are ways that you can break it down if 5WH might be a lot all in one piece. You can certainly break that into smaller bits.
Thank you.
Tamara says they struggle, they get better over time.
Right.
Mike, in this strategy, I would encourage them to look at the text rather than guessing, particularly when it is a detail that is listed in the text specifically. When you get into inferencing, it gets a little more into needing to put those clues together. I'm not sure about having students guess answers before they read something. So I think you're talking, they look at the questions and then they try to answer the questions before the text. That actually is, like, if you work with GED prep, that is actually a very good test taking strategy. I'm not certain it's the best practice when we're teaching reading strategies to students. Kristine and Marn, do you have a response to that idea? Mike's question of having students guess answers, like read the questions and guess before reading the text.
I mean, if I'm going to do something where I want them to make some predictions beforehand, I would do it in a different way, where I would give them, you know, I'd have them make maybe some predictions on text features, or I would give them maybe a handful of words from the text, and have them, you know, talk about some possible ideas about what it might be about. The reason I hesitate on having them guess answers to questions is it might take them away from the text. And sometimes when we have them think about things and they're inaccurate things, they can store those in the same place. They store what the right answer is. And so it could be confusing.
And
Yeah,
I think that's true when you're introducing new vocabulary too. We've really encouraged people to step away from that. So tell me what this word means, or who knows what this word means, rather than ask, tell. So I think it kind of goes along with that it opens the door to maybe some uncharted territory.
Yeah, I would save that. I would save that idea, Mike, for when you're doing a lesson specifically on test taking strategies, because the type of reading we do when we're taking a test is a different type of reading than we do when we're reading like a document for work where we want a lot of meaning and that type of thing. So I think there's a place for it, but not when we're focused on teaching the reader. I would keep that more as a test taking lesson. Yeah, Tamara, that was, I was listening to that. I like that idea. You could have small groups that all have a different piece of text. The small group writes questions, but they don't write the answers, and then they can pass it on to the next group. Okay, so there's a way that you can really dig into this strategy where students are both creating the questions and answering the questions. And honestly, with that kind of activity, the teacher's prep is mostly about locating the text, right? And then maybe guiding them a little bit or adding to some of the questions that they answer. So it makes it a more efficient lesson to prepare for. Okay. So 5WH in summary, training students to look for answers that are directly answering those questions, training students to put together details to answer those questions that are not directly answered, more of an inference, and then training students to ask questions of themselves as they read. Okay, use this questioning strategy as they read, are things that a student can take. So if we're reading about Copernicus today and we're using the strategy, tomorrow we might practice it with photosynthesis. The next day we might practice it on the branches of government, okay? But by using that same strategy day after day after day, the students with enough guided practice should reach a point where they can apply that without the teacher doing a lot of coaching, I guess a lot of coaching or a lot of the front end work on that. Okay, particularly good strategy for finding details and for getting students to answer text-dependent questions and not answering questions just from their personal experiences. Okay, back to you, Marn.
Yeah, I think what we'll do is backtrack to the 5-minute break. So
Sounds
I
good.
will start the timer and we'll see you in 5 minutes. Read for main ideas. You'll notice the first step is exactly the same or very similar to the first step from routine 1. Begin with less challenging texts, introduce each, and provide simple meanings for words. And it's less challenging text to start with, so that learners can focus on the strategy and not be confused by the text. So you'll start with less challenging, move to challenging, and then over the long run into more complex texts. When you're reading for main ideas, you will read the text paragraph by paragraph. After each paragraph, you will model asking and charting answers to or for who or what is this about. In this question or with this question, you're seeking topics. What are the details? In this question, you're seeking information, more information about the topic. As I said, you'll gradually increase the complexity and variety of texts. And then something you can add on if you think your students are ready is to model and guide summary writing using the topics and details that were generated. So you can again use, let's see, went the wrong way, sorry. So here's a sample graphic organizer, very simple, very basic to create, where you have the paragraph numbers along the left, the who or what questions in the middle, and what are the details alongside. So bringing the passage that Penny shared with us, who or what is this paragraph about? It's about Nicholas Copernicus. What is it about? His theory about the center of the universe. And then the details, which I tried to make less about the dates and more about the important details, is that he viewed the universe as sun-centered. This disagreed with the Catholic Church's view of earth-centered, and the Catholic Church was very powerful back then. His new theory or his new view was not published until 1543, the same year that he died. And that might have been on purpose on his part. Surprisingly, the Catholic Church did not formally accept his view until 1822, and this was 300 years later. So you can see by identifying who or what, and then other details, you have a lot of meat that you can use to write a summary. That too would have to be modeled and guided. It doesn't come easy for students as like thinking of questions or asking questions or answering questions. Any questions on routine 2?
Can you go back to that slide? I can add a few things. So I've used this with my students a lot over the years. And sometimes I get a little resistance as to why do I have to write all of this? Okay, so the first thing I tell them is that you don't have to write complete sentences. You can certainly use bullet points and keywords. When we're looking for the who or what it's about, we're looking for the topic. So I train them to look for repeated words or references so they can identify the topic. After we've done a modeling or a guided practice of the next day, I might ask students to say, tell me about Copernicus without looking at this graphic organizer. And it's quite impressive what they remember. Okay, the process of writing things down does help them remember details from like day to day. The other thing that we can do is I could take this and I could ask them 5 WH questions so I can actually pair the strategies. But the next day I could ask things like, how did the Catholic Church react to Copernicus's theory? Okay, and that helps build the buy-in. The other thing that has helped me with build buy-in with my students on kind of the workload in the strategy is explaining to them if they are headed to college, okay, using this process when you're reading will help you do better on quizzes, and it gives you a built-in study guide. So instead of having to reread an entire text, you can save a little bit of time when it's time to prepare for a quiz or exam.
Thanks, Penny.
Okay.
You can see why I wanted her on this webinar with me. She has so much knowledge about how it fits into a classroom. Kristine or Tamara, do you want to add something?
No, I just love listening to Penny talk about reading.
I can almost picture it happening in her classroom when she talks about it. So, all right, we'll move on to.
All right, I'm back on. So a third routine that we can use to focus on teaching our readers, not just the content of the reading, is to help them identify and build knowledge in text structures, okay? If reading came easily to you, you might have learned, you might have figured out text structures without it being explicitly taught to you, but we can't assume that the students in our classrooms are necessarily super strong readers that have just kind of figured things out on their own. So explicit instruction in text structures can help them get a lot of mileage in learning how to understand a wide variety of text. Again, this is a unit, not a lesson, and this is a unit that can go weeks, if not months, depending on how frequently your class meets and how deep you dig into things. You want to select one text structure at a time and focus on one text structure where you explain, model, and multiple guided practices before the students try it on their own. You might do that for a week or two. Then you introduce a second text structure. Same thing, model, explain, model, guide the practice over multiple kind of sessions, have them start to do it on their own, okay? At that point, you might even want to do a review where you give them text structures like maybe a worksheet or something where both of those text structures are present and they have to determine which is which, okay? And then in the following weeks, you continue to add text structures. We begin by reading the select text aloud. You can help them draw attention to the things that the author has done with the actual physical printing of the text and discuss why. Why are certain words bolded? Why is something in italics? Why are things underlined? The paragraphing, the sectioning, that type of thing, okay? As you model, as you're reading, you also, the teacher, model how to complete a graphic organizer that depicts that particular text structure, okay? In following class periods, then you do the guided practice together. You use the same graphic organizer, okay, with different types of, like, say, descriptive text, if you start with description. Okay, and then as time goes on, you can increase the complexity and the variety. So I'd like to walk you through an example right now. Marn, can you give me, I think the next slide is our example. So this is a piece of text. I begin by explaining. So explaining is not only explaining the process of what we're doing, but it's also providing an explanation of why this is a valuable skill, okay, to learn. So I might begin by telling my students, asking, have you ever gotten to the end of the page and you haven't remembered anything that you just read? Okay, and they say, oh yeah, that's happened. In my classroom, we say your brain was in Cancun. Okay, we say the thinking part of your brain was on vacation. The words were coming in, but your brain wasn't thinking about it. Okay, and then I will tell them using graphic organizers to depict the text structure forces the thinking part of the brain to do its job. Okay, so you can think about a way to help them build the buy-in. Then I would explain the process, and then I would model. So I'm going to give everyone just a minute to read through this text on your own. You don't need me to read it to you. So I'll just have you read that on your own, and then I'll show you the next step. Okay, Marn, I'm going to share my screen at this point, okay? This is an example of a graphic organizer that I would fill out as my students watch. And as I'm filling it out, I would be referring back to the text and I would be talking through. So the first thing I would explain to my students is, as I read our sample text, I saw the word Pawnee repeated in many paragraphs. It wasn't in the very first sentence, but it did appear in almost every other paragraph. So I think that's the topic. As I look at what they say about the Pawnee, it seems that this passage is describing the Pawnee people. So I'm going to choose a graphic organizer that will help me represent a descriptive text. Okay, I will put Pawnee in the center, indicating that is my topic. And in the bubbles around the edge, I will record different details from the text. This is note-taking, so I'm not worried about writing complete sentences, and I'm not going to be too fussy about mechanics, okay? It's just jotting down keywords to hold the idea on my graphic organizer. I will point out that I could have put different details on my graphic organizer. I didn't put every detail from the text on there. So somebody else could have done this, and they might have had some of the detail circles might have been different than what I created, and that's okay. Okay. After I modeled this, then we would take a new passage, and then we would start using this exact graphic organizer again for a different passage. And then I would start asking my students, okay, I might begin by helping them identify the topic, and then I'll have my class start finding details. We can also refer back to the text and even highlight those details as well. A couple places where this can kind of go awry is getting overly focused on the graphic organizer, okay? The graphic organizer is a tool to help us understand the text. The purpose of the activity is not to create identical graphic organizers. They should be similar. They all should have a similar topic, but they don't have to be identical to what you create as a teacher or identical to their classmates. Okay. The other thing that I would recommend is focus on one graphic organizer for text structure, okay? Students don't need to know 17 different types of graphic organizer for description, they need to know one that they can use well. Okay, it is about understanding the content, not about understanding or creating this beautiful artistic diagram. And sometimes my students get a little bit led astray. They get kind of hijacked by that. Distracted is the word. They get distracted by the art of it. This is a handout I give my students at the start of a unit that can last anywhere from like 6 weeks to a couple of months. And it's a reference sheet that they can hand back, that they can refer to. These are the graphic organizers that I kind of chose. I'm not allowed to share this because it's something we use in my class, but they're like, there's copyright issues and that kind of thing. So you can create your own to use in class. I chose these because many of my students are preparing for GED exams, and these are the types of things that are asked on the GED test. In addition to these, I also will use plot diagram for fiction, for narrative text, okay? But you can see our descriptive would work for nonfiction text like we just did. It would also work for describing a character or describing the setting of a story, okay? Sequence in a narrative text would be the steps of the plot, okay? But in a nonfiction text, it could be steps in a process that somebody has to complete, okay? It's up to you to kind of figure out what graphic organizers you want to use and have your students, you know, kind of be specialist in the classroom. This particular one that I use for the model comes from Freeform web graphic organizers, has quite a few that you can just convert into a like Adobe, and then you're able to type directly on it. So if you are teaching an online class, that is a resource that would be helpful for you there. Okay, as you can see, if each of these text structures is going to be a different lesson that might take me 4, 5, 6 days before my students are kind of beginning to do it independently, this can be, you know, this can be several months. This unit can be several months long. But they then leave me with a tool that if they're having to read a very complicated description of something for work, okay, they have a tool to help them with the thinking process, okay? We're building that, the cognition, okay, that they can take to other types of text in their future. Okay. All right, Marn, you want to share your screen again, please?
Everybody see that?
Not yet.
Okay. Kristine?
Find your green button on the Zoom toolbar, hit the green button that says share screen.
I'm not seeing that. Let me minimize.
I was responding to somebody on the chat. Which slide? I think, are we on the slide?
21.
We're finishing up text structure right now, Kristine.
Okay. So do we want any of the text structure? Or are we ready to move on to the teacher approved comprehension resources?
Let's just take a moment for any questions. So we've introduced 3 strategies. We've introduced the 5WH to help students identify details. We've introduced we called it the summary chart, where students list the topic and list the details to help them key in on a main idea. And then we've talked about identifying text structures. Right here, these are just examples of a few graphic organizers that you can complete using Google Docs, you know, at home. Here's a chronology one. This is an alternative to the Venn diagram. I sometimes use this when I'm teaching online simply because the circles, it can be hard to get the text to fit in there just right. But I like the Venn diagram. Here's another way that you can organize a compare and contrast. Next one.
And how would, wait, Penny, how would you,
yeah.
how would you do that, for example? So are they, so like
So
do the columns connect?
this is simply, it's just a Venn diagram, but in a table format instead of the circles. So the yellow is one circle, the blue is the other, and then yellow and blue make green. So
Okay, good. So they don't have to go across, like
No.
focus on it. Okay, good.
Nope. And what I would do is I would try to match the differences, like in yellow and blue.
Mhm.
Yeah, to show the difference between a specific point in the article. I use this if I'm teaching online, just because I've had a little bit of difficulty. The Venn diagram, I think, depending on your source, there's some copyright issues with that too, so I couldn't put it here. Okay. So you as a teacher, pick the one that you think makes the most sense to you, and then use that in your classroom. Okay. Here's some other examples of something you could create on your own. You can also Google graphic organizers and find a lot of ideas as well. Here's a problem and solution. Okay, all right, now that we've done that, let's open the chat up for a minute for any questions, clarifications, or comments about any of the 3 strategies that we introduced.
Keith mentioned lots of good stuff, Penny.
Good, I'm glad you're
that
finding
you are.
it. I like it when you have something practical, right? You can take home and use in your classroom. So I hope you're getting some of that from this.
And I don't know if you were, while I was doing something, I don't know if you were talking about how sometimes a great scaffold, especially if you're working on the lower end with students of students, or they're just learning the graphic organizer, is you can even give them graphic organizers that are partially filled, or that have, sometimes I've given graphic organizers that have, you know, like a stem or a sentence frame, you know, to help guide them. So you can scaffold graphic organizers as well. But as Penny said, the point is to teach a way of thinking, or to get them thinking. That was a great point that Penny made about, I used to get really caught up in the actual graphic organizer.
And those graphic organizers, just like our summary chart, can also be used as a way to ask questions, to review, to kind of study, okay, for a quiz or text on that information. Yep,
Yeah.
for essay, Tamara, I agree too. It works. Those graphic organizers also work wonderfully when they have to write a descriptive paragraph, a sequence paragraph, or those types of things as well. Yeah.
And one of the things about graphic organizers that, you know, I've gotten so many through the years, and it's one of those strategies that just keeps coming up. I mean, over 25 years that I have been teaching reading, and I forget about it sometimes, but there's a reason it keeps coming up. That's a great question from Doretta. I'm gonna drop to you, Penny.
Yep, I'm going to drop the link for the descriptive one that I used. And beyond that, I think I am just going to have you Google freeform web graphic organizer sequence or that kind of thing. And then you should be able to find some others. Okay.
And there's another question, Penny, from Doretta. Which ESL level would you start using graphic organizers?
Oh, good question. Hold on. I got the link in there. Okay.
I've seen them used pretty early on in beginning.
So the students I work with are usually reading at about a 4th grade, like on a TABE or higher. That's kind of where my group begins, but it can certainly be used in an advanced or even an intermediate ELL. Depending on the text, your text might not have as many details. So this is a good point. We need to train our teachers to adjust the graphic organizer to fit the text, or train our students. They get caught up on, like, if I give them a descriptive organizer and there's 5 circles, there must be 5 details in the paragraph.
Right.
That's not the way it works. So they need to be given permission to adjust the graphic organizer so it matches the content of what they're reading. So if you're reading more of a life skills, like a paragraph, something that only has a topic and 3 details, you can start with a circle that has only 3 circles around it.
And then they can add.
Yeah.
I think just to go back to Doretta's question, I know that when it comes to beginning ESL, by the time they get to high beginning, they're reading multiple connected sentences. And so at that point, there's probably enough meat there for them to maybe do something very simple. Maybe sequencing. I've seen sequencing graphic organizers used very early in ESL. It would really depend. Some of the ones like the similarities and different, you could even use something like that, but much simpler.
I think any of those graphic organizers are very applicable to more of a low-level life skills reading, compare, contrast, problem, solution. Again, the students, just because the English is a lower level doesn't mean the intelligence is. And those graphic organizers are really working at the comprehension, the thinking, and you're just adjusting it to fit the content of what they're reading. Yeah.
Yeah, sequencing is definitely helpful. But absolutely, but I mean, I've seen pretty low level cause and effect, talking about that. There's a lot of different texts, problem solution, I mean, if you're reading a short text maybe about something going on in your apartment building, and you need to get the landlord to fix something, there's a lot of use for them with kind of real life scenarios.
Yeah. And again, the thinking, the ability to comprehend and think about that is there. Even if they're struggling some with the English vocabulary, right? Okay, Martin, you want to put up the screen again? I think we've gotten the feedback we need.
Actually, Kristine, you have to put up the screen.
Or Kristine, whoever.
Oh, there we go. Well, you have to open up the document too.
You got it.
So we've looked at this 4 times now. However, we're on the far right, looking at the comprehension resources. Remember that these are arranged according to free with sign up or subscription, access or print for purchase, and then leveled books for purchase. So very, very similar to what we've looked at for fluency right next door, but it definitely supports what I said at the beginning, that you don't have to create passages or even graphic organizers on your own. There's a lot of choice out there.
And I'm going to put in a plug for a couple of my favorites. E-reading worksheets has a tremendous amount of resources for text structure written at a paragraph level. Okay, I've cut and pasted a lot from there. That's the one that I like. I would recommend that one if text structure is something that you want to do. The other thing is there's no sequence to these strategies. You don't have to start with, you can pick any one that you think would work for your students and begin there.
I will say that, and some of you may have heard this, if some of you like to use Newsela, they're going to be going through a pretty dramatic change. Whereas originally they were completely free, and then they went to a lot of things free. They are now limiting even more to 4 news articles weekly that will keep, that will change weekly. They're going to up the amount of activities that can be done with the 4 news articles, and they will still be available at different Lexile levels, but they're really reducing the amount of free text. But of course, ReadWorks is free, and there's all kinds of things there. Common Lit, although Common Lit really starts at about a 3rd grade. I'm not sure if it's is it the C-Cell library? Up here, there's a lot of texts really geared for ESL, and they're free. And I always say, if you want to invest just a small amount of money, the Change Agent is the best. It's the best thing you can buy for so little money. And when you pay, I think it's under $100, you get access to all of their back issues and all of their audio files and everything.
And you can choose between print and electronic access, right?
Yeah. And everything is they're written by adult students, and they're themed. They're really nice if you want students reading multiple texts around a theme. It's a good resource.
Yeah.
Michelle is mentioning that Common Lit has they have an option now called Target Lessons. And Michelle, I stumbled upon that a few months ago, and I've really been enjoying that. So you can click on something like, I want to focus on finding evidence. And they will give you, I don't know, maybe 15 to 20 different articles written at different levels, where the questions focus on identifying and finding evidence. So I like that feature in Common Lit.
Thank you for bringing that up. Less than $50 for 2 years. Michelle's saying she thinks, I mean, it's the best.
Yeah.
Are you getting paid to do this?
No, I have used the Change Agent with, low intermediate. I've used the Change Agent with GED level learners just because the texts are so engaging.
Yeah.
They're great writing prompts. They're great when you want students to compare points of view about something. They're so engaging because they're written by adult learners.
And they're also just a great informal resource. Like if you're like me and half of your class needs a post test and half of them doesn't. Okay. You want an activity for half to do while the others test. I can hand them the Change Agent, and they can read and work on that together with a lot of, it can also be used for non-guided practice, just reading for enjoyment activity when you need a sponge activity as well. It's very versatile.
And it might motivate them to submit an article.
Yeah, I had a student that
Yes.
got published in it. Yep, I had one student that was published, so it's pretty cool.
Yeah, and it's quite the peer process that they have to go through to be published, which is an additional experience.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so don't lose track of this document. It's always going to be in the participant folder. So even if it gets lost, you can find it, or maybe from somebody else. Kristine, do you want to talk about the ELA resources?
Yeah, we've got ELA resources. I can just click here in one of our, oh, goodness. That must be when we changed our website over. If you go in, oh, wait a second. It appears there might be something going on with our website.
Yeah, Kristine, I ran into that earlier today when I was looking for the link for our webinar. I got the same message.
Oh, I need to let Marisa know there might be something, or it might be something where Marisa is always in the background working on the website. So she might be working on something. But when you go to atlasabe.org, along the top, you will see resources. And of course, we have all these great resource libraries. The STAR and EBRI resource library. We've got the CCR standards. We've got ELA resources. We've got resources for teaching the standards with ESL. Just lots of really great things here that sometimes I know people forget that they're there, and people all over the country from other ABE systems come to our website all the time for our resource library. So don't forget them.
Yay, we made it.
Thanks, North Dakota. They say they recommend it all the time. Michelle.
Thanks,
Okay.
Michelle.
This is my favorite part of the webinars, is when we stop and ask this concluding question or give you statements to answer. Please use one or both of the sentence stems to type in the chat box where you want to share either a potential success or a potential challenge. It's just been a really nice way for us to end each webinar. I'm glad to see that the routines will be put in place, will be implemented. With some affirmation too about text structure being so helpful.
I want to emphasize, sometimes I think people conflate graphic organizers with text structures. I just want to repeat the point that a graphic organizer is a tool to help students understand and identify the texture of the structure of a text. But the graphic organizer is not the goal. That's not the end product. Okay.
I appreciate Kelly admitting she's slacked off a little bit, so this is a good reminder. I think we all need those reminders of best practices.
Yep, I would agree, Keith. Getting students to ask themselves questions. When I do a diagnostic assessment and there's that set of comprehension questions, the kind of cognition, one of them is I ask myself questions when I'm reading. I very seldom have students who say, yes, I do that. That they walk into us with the habit of asking questions as they read.
I think picking the 5W and 1H is a good place to start. Now that's 6 questions, but you may only coach them or guide them in maybe 3 questions. Who, what, where? That's a great idea to have a bookmark, so they're always reminded of those key questions.
So many good responses here.
Yeah, yes, thanks so much. Next slide. So normally we run overtime. Today we're 5 minutes early. So we're giving you those 5 minutes back, along with another thank you for joining us. And remember that evaluations and CEUs will arrive in your inbox next week from Gail Rutan. Thanks, everybody.
One thing as you're going, yes, and thank you to Marn, thank you to Penny. I am working on creating a more intensive EBRI experience where you actually will be doing assessments and things like that. And that will hopefully be coming this fall. So for those of you who are looking for more, keep your eyes open because it's something that's coming. And, you know, as always, reading is a big focus for us. Penny has been on the language and literacy advisory team, and we are always focused on reading and needs and making sure to include at all of our events. And if you're ever interested in presenting, go to Atlas. There's a suggestion box. You can suggest yourself and your topic.
And it will be happily accepted.
Yes, we are always looking for people to step up and take on leadership. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Enjoy the rest of the afternoon.
A good group.
Yeah, I think a lot of them have been returnees, don't you, Kristine?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. There's definitely a core group here.
So I don't recognize the names, too many of the names. Carolyn Nurhouse for sure.
Yeah.
So,
Keith,
yeah.
Keith is from Rosemont and Apple Valley.
Mhm.
Kelly,
Rinda?
I think, is Kelly from Minneapolis?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
Tamara, do you have a question? She may have stepped away.
Yeah. So what is this big everything coming out next week or in the fall?
Next year. Man, I don't know how big it's going to be. I'm gonna just get rid of. There we go. Yeah, I'm taking the courses from Links, the EBRI courses, and I'm going to be building them out because I think there's more. They're not meant to be. They don't have somebody on the other side giving feedback, really, or anything like that, like we like to do with our courses. So building in reflections and building in a place for some discussions, maybe doing it where we can gather some folks together who maybe want to, over a period of time, not kind of a like cohort model. We're doing it with math right now where people have an opportunity. We also did it with ADE Foundations where people have opportunities to connect with a facilitator, just offering more resources and things like that, and CEUs, which you cannot get from the Links courses.
So is it teaching adults to read? Is that?
Yeah, they've got two new courses. One is for lower level, and then one is more for the higher level into high school equivalency.
Oh, okay.
And they do very similar things. And Marn, they're loaded with your stuff, like and reading skills for today's adults. And the BAT is in there, the TAP is in there, morphology matrix, you know, and Atlas makes up a lot of the resources actually. So I discovered that when I took both of the courses, and I thought this is great. But one of the things that our teachers appreciate, at least with the CCRS Foundations course, is we hear this all the time. The feedback is really important. And of course you saw that with STAR. But something that teachers can do kind of at their own pace. We need something like that. So I would kick it off, but then I would want to hand it off to some folks, some consultants who could do it and respond and that kind of thing. So
Okay, So looking ahead, it's likely Minnesota won't do a STAR training.
I'm
in
not
the
100%
future?
sure. I'm not sure right now because I'm
Okay.
really the only person who's in a position. And there's no way I could take on a STAR cohort, as you well know, Mark.
Well, if you had 5 people, maybe, but even 10 people would be a lot of work.
It would be a lot of work. It would be a lot of work. Yeah. So, but we do need to continue strongly with EBRI. It is one of the only very specific WIOA requirements.
Okay.
I wish writing was too, but math isn't. None of them are, but evidence-based reading instruction is clearly defined as being a requirement that we have to prove.
Okay.
So
So if Project STAR asks me when Minnesota is doing their next training, I will
Tell
just
them
say not
you're-
this year.
You're not at the table. You don't know.
yeah, you don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
we're unsure.
Sure
We've had
answer.
some conversations, we just, because of, Atlas we're tasked to do even more than when you were there, Marn, and we just keep getting more things from MDE to do, and we're really having to pick and choose every year what we're going to do. So
Well, and I'll just say I'm not at the table. If you want to know, maybe you should ask, but I
they
think they're a
certainly
little
can ask me. They can contact Astrid. Astrid will probably
Yeah.
say the same. Will say the same thing I'm saying is
Yeah.
this is something we're looking out. We're going to have a brand new latte team, and of course, this is a conversation we want to bring to the latte team to get their input as well. So
Okay.
we've been kind of hyper focused on Canvas right now. The fact that Canvas is our new platform, and we're trying to rebuild our courses like the ACES TIF, AB Foundation, CCRS, all in the new and it's a big project, and we've also taken on a lot of the IET work. Patsy and I in particular, coaching programs on developing their shared sets of learning outcomes. We never did that before. We're spending a lot of time doing that.
Okay.
So Penny, you for sure are on my short list of people moving into the future. Just your insight as we continue to make decisions. Whether you're on latte or not, you're on our short list of people that we want your insight and opinions. So
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that we've got EBRI continuing. That's as long as the knowledge is getting disseminated, I think that's what matters. So
yeah.
Yeah.
And people are getting their hands on actually testing.
Yeah.
All
Okay,
right.
thank you so much. It was all yours, Penny. So thank you so much for
I know, Penny, it's so great to hear you.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I was thinking it's so nice to be able to do this and not have to be memorizing a script. It's just so different than 10, 15 years ago, right?
Right.
And you got and you nobody's checking you off to make sure you're showing a sense of humor, Penny.
Right, that's right. Or you spit out the exact words they want you to.
Thanks, everybody. Have a nice weekend.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.